Mrs. Boynton,
Here.
Mrs. Macklin, Mr. Akins,
Here.
Mrs. Turner Birch, Mrs. Carter.
Here.
Thank you. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Carter.
Visitors are always welcome at our board meetings. If you wish to address the board, please complete the form provided upon arrival at the meeting and give it to the treasurer. Oral presentations are limited to 3 minutes each. So that the meeting can proceed uninterrupted, please silence all the electronic devices. That's not right.
What's the other one?
Well, but I was looking at today's.
Okay.
So yeah, I was like, wait
All right, thank you.
a minute.
Item number 2 on our agenda is our one plan goal, 2.01. Please read them at your leisure. Item number 3 is our superintendent report, 3.01. Could I have a motion to approve the additional candidates for graduation for 2024 graduation?
Motion to approve?
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Carter, second by Mr. Akins. Do we have any questions or comments about the additional graduates?
Nope, I'm just.
Hearing
excited.
none. Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Carter,
Yes.
Mr. Akins,
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton.
Yes. Motion passes 3-0. Dr. Johnson, do you want to say anything about this? No? All right, then we're good. We're going to move on to item number 4, which is our treasurer report, 4.01. It's our 5-year forecast. Are you going to do the presentation before we approve? Before?
Yes.
Okay. All right then. You're on, Mrs. Armstrong. All right.
I know they will come late,
No pressure.
All right, good evening, board. Today I'm going to go over the 5-year forecast, and this is the May forecast. A couple of the slides just up front are going to be repeat from November as well as from February, so I will probably go through those faster, but if you do have questions, just let me know. I'm just trying to reiterate some of the same information to make sure that everyone understands it. So the first thing is to remind you the objective of the 5-year forecast. It's to engage you, the local Board of Education, and the community in the long-range planning and discussion of the financial issues facing the school district. It serves as a basis to determine the school district's ability to sign our 412 certificates, and it provides a method for the Department of Education and Workforce and the Auditor of State to identify schools with potential financial problems. The most important of these 3, I think, is educating you, the board, and the community on our long-range planning and discussions. So we look at the timeline. Right now we are in the May 5-year forecast. Again, we've seen this a few times where we go from November, tax budget, 5-year, our appropriations, temporary, and then permanent. So we are into the May 5-year forecast right now. We've gone over what kind of happens, but I do want to talk about May being the time that we update the forecast and assumptions based on actual numbers from the current school year. In November, it's only about a month into the school year with actual numbers, so this is looking at our numbers in the fiscal year. We're updating our assumptions and projections with that information. So looking at the current fiscal year, our projected revenue, here we have about $61 million, with, again, the important component here, we've talked about these before, is that our biggest contributor for our revenue is our local taxes. Our local taxes make up almost 60% of our revenue and only 24% from state funding. I also want to share here, that's a big misconception when people think about Bedford, because our surrounding cities are not made up the same. We have a larger portion of local taxes that contribute to our revenue. Again, you've seen this before, and remembering that local taxes are a big part of our revenue. Again, as property values go up, we don't always see an increase if it's relatively flat, again, due to House Bill 920. And again, a little bit about the state funding, just as a reminder that The local share, which is our portion versus the state share, looks at our number of students enrolled, it looks at our property value, it looks at our taxpayer income, and it looks at our per pupil base cost, which is unique to each district, and it also takes into account supplemental income that we receive, again, such as our special ed, CTE, things along those lines. So when we look at the other side, for this fiscal year, our projected expenditures are coming in at about $68 million, with our biggest expense being our personnel cost at 74%. So I think that's the important part when we look at the expenditures and when we go into what went into the assumptions is understanding what components make up the biggest part of our revenue and expenditures. So now we look at the 5-year forecast. We are looking at, for fiscal year 24 and in this year, with a revenue deficit of $7 million. And as you see, because of compounding, that continues to grow, which puts us into fiscal year 26 having a negative cash balance, which just continues to grow as we get into fiscal year 28. Some of the things that occurred between our last forecast and this current forecast was we did have a written plan that we took in December of 28. Actually, let me go to the next slide. Here we go. So this is actually looking at the difference from the November forecast till today. So looking at that, our revenue, we did increase by $2.7 million. And when I get into a little bit more of the detail, a large part of that is due to our enrollment number increase, and so we're receiving some additional state funding. Also, we got our settlement for our property taxes, so we were able to true that up to actual numbers instead of projections. On the other side, we're looking at the expenses, which increased by almost $5 million, which is due to, again, I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more detail once we get into the next slide, but it has to do with our purchase services and our supplies, and then also the biggest component is our salaries and benefits, which again makes up the largest component of our expenses. So just to talk a little bit about what went into this forecast, again, the written plan. As a reminder, we had the $1.5 million from the ESSER dollars that we used to book as revenue to help offset some of our deficit. We had a capital outlay reduction, which again were those school buses. We had staff reductions through attrition. We had some purchase service reductions through cell phone lines, and then some position and restructuring. Through that, I believe we had eliminated compound. It was almost $4 million, which was kind of our goal when we had met back in November. But now, when we look on the other side of items that we've added into the assumptions, we also have that our salary and benefits are looking at a 2.5 higher than what we projected. The purchase services are showing $2 million than what we projected, and the supplies and materials increased by almost $600,000. So when we, let me see what my next slide is. Yes, so when we look at some of those items, first, the salaries and benefits. Again, November, we don't have all of the current year salaries in. We had several positions that were open that were filled throughout the year that added to that number, as well as a lot of substitutes that we've had to fill in for positions for various reasons. When we look at our purchase services, a large part of that, again, would be our contracted substitutes, additional contracted services, our tuition, specifically to special ed, as well as our legal and professional services. Those were the biggest areas that we saw for purchase services. For supplies and materials, it was made up mostly in our general supplies. When I narrowed that down to departments, it came in, and just as a caveat to this statement, just looking at the OPUs, which is the departments, it came in at technology, high school, and data assessments were our biggest spenders, but that doesn't mean that they actually attributed to the overall increase, because they, to me, those make sense to be our largest departments. So it also could be that some of the other departments spent more that added up to a higher amount, so I am researching that number a little bit more. That came to me as a question recently, so I did want to address it because I felt you guys might question that as well. All right, so here, this is kind of small, so hopefully you can see it on your screen. This is looking at our cash flow, which is kind of what we use to determine the projections compared to the November forecast. And then we look at that variance, and that's how we update the new forecast to tie out to where we think we're really gonna fall for the year. So again, if this is on the revenue side, so the restricted grant in is coming in higher, the unrestricted is coming in higher. Everything else is not huge, but it accounted for about, what is this, $400,000 difference in our revenue increase. Then on the other side, when we look at our, again, this is the cash flow, which is, these are actual numbers through February, March, actual numbers through March, and then projections for April, May, and June. This is where we see that personnel services are gonna come in at 1.5, benefits 1 million over, purchase services 1.9, and supplies and materials 622,000, higher than what we thought they were gonna be in November. So, with all of that said, that's how we get to that $7 million now deficit for this current fiscal year. And I think when we met in November, it was maybe 4 million, and we talked about eliminating that 4 million, which again, we did through the written plan. But now when we look at the actuals, we have a bigger number that we need to try to eliminate. So if I keep going, do you have a question, or you want me to finish and then ask the questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
It was about the retirement insurance benefits,
Mm-hmm.
because I know, didn't we just recently approve some new benefit packages? Wasn't that something that just changed not too long ago? Yes.
Yes.
So is that part of why it was it's higher?
No, I can speak to that.
Okay.
So this is just the employer side of the expense. In retirement, it also looks at the STRS, SERS, what's in the life insurance, workers' comp, all of those things roll up into benefits. So with higher salaries, your benefits just naturally go up higher. And for that package that we include, we move that to 024, so it does not affect general fund, and this is all general fund. So any savings that we do have there will go into our 024 to build that fund. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about, because another component that was an assumption in this 5-year forecast was the CTE. And I think I told you guys in November that we were still collecting data, and so we didn't include it in that forecast, and so now it is in here. Some of the key things that I thought was important for you guys to know is that for this fiscal year, for a CTE student, the cost per pupil, according to the state, is estimated to be $9,855. This also shows, and we talked about this earlier, as of our May 2nd payment, which was on May the 6th, we have a ADM of about 2,722. So that just kind of speaks to our enrollment, showing some increase from the November forecast to now. This slide also, again, this is from our forecast public data off of OD or DEW, speaks to the fact that our share for the cost of CTE and the average cost per student, actually what the state picks up is only 37% of the cost of educating our students. The district covers the rest when it comes to educating regular and CTE students. So in regards to CTE, what I wanted to talk about was how they calculate that funding when we were trying to project the revenue. So the formula for that is they look at the number of students enrolled, they multiply it by a percentage, and it depends on the category. So each class has a different category. I believe our biggest category was category 2. Most of our programs fell there. So they would pay us about 59% of the cost. Then on top of that, they multiply that by the state share. So they take the cost per kid times the number of kids multiply it by the 59%, so they reduce it to only 59, and then also reduce it to only covering the 27%. So that's how the CTE, and this is just the general fund, what we call the weighted fund CTE revenue, how that works. So that is a very complicated number to show you as a whole because it rolls into a lot of things. Again, you have to remember that that state share number can shift based on property values, student schedules, depending on, not everyone's considered a full FTE. If they're a half-time CTE student, it kind of fluctuates. So we built a formula to find the average, and that's how we build the revenue totals into the 5-year forecast. The second component, which is important because as of right now, we have not offset any cost for the CTE program for the Perkins grant because we have not received how much we will get as a district for Perkins because we're coming from that consortium that won't be available to us until July 1. So as a conservative approach, I am not accounting for that because I don't know what the value would be. I can say that for this year, we received about $63,000 from Cleveland Heights University Heights in Perkins dollars for our CTE program. In addition, we have that career exploration and awareness funds that I do know for this year we received $7.50 per student. But going into next fiscal year, we don't have the exact figures for that yet. So again, that's not accounted for. I think this year we got a little bit over $20,000 in that fund to spend on career exploration and awareness funds. I'm not going to talk about them. I believe that Carla and Jatina have talked about the Perkins grant and the career exploration awareness funds, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that as I was making these assumptions, that there is a portion of the CTE cost that could potentially move out of the general fund and be covered and picked up by the Perkins grant. So I already said it, but I'll say it again. This year, $7 million deficit, which we were trying to get away from. We were trying to balance the budget. This is looking at it compounded. Again, by the time we get to fiscal year 2028, we're looking at a $35 million negative cash balance, which we know we cannot do. So, just an overview of what the challenges are. We have inflation. We knew there was inflation, but inflation is definitely growing faster. It's not stopping faster than what we even thought when we met in November, so that's a huge issue. The other thing that we have to account for is a lot of things. Some things do, but a lot of things, when the price rises, that becomes the new floor. So we have to account for knowing that we also have to cut, but we have to also know those prices are gonna stay there. Now they might stabilize, but they're not gonna go lower. Contracted service is the same thing. Inflation, those prices have rose. And we have to think about how are we gonna deal with the fact that the prices are rising, and that's our new floor for those services. Salary and benefits continue to increase. That's our biggest expenditure. Offset by local taxes remain flat, and that's our biggest revenue. So we know there's a problem. Then there's the staffing shortage in classified staff, which is forcing us to use contracted services, which is, again, at just the inflated rate. On top of hiring classified staff, we have to be competitive in the market in order to get our own internal classified staff as well. And then we know we have the Cuyahoga County reappraisal that's happening this year in July, and that's going to affect our state funding because, again, that's going to make us look a little bit richer, but we're not going to get more money from the property tax increases. Decline in enrollment was on here because we still are projecting a decline in enrollment. We lowered the step or the slope of the decrease in enrollment because we are looking at the fact that we did see 51 students come back this school year alone. So we did adjust for that, which kind of helped us on the revenue side. And then most importantly is that we've had no operating levy in 9 years. The last time we had an operating levy was 2015. So the board, the leadership team, we're focusing on long-term planning, which our goal is to help us reduce our expenses over an extended period with the new school. But our challenge is making it to those new schools, because that's how we are gonna be able to save costs when we know that we can't get more revenue without going to the taxpayers. So that's our challenge, is making it to those reduced costs that way. So here again, this is just showing the actual, where we still show the enrollment declining, but not as steep as we had it declining originally. Days of cash on hand. This year, we're gonna end the year with 71 days of cash on hand. Fiscal year 25, 14 days, that's 2 weeks. And then by the time we get to 26, we run out of cash, we'll end the year with -40. That's if nothing changes, and we know we can't not change anything. And then it just continues to get worse. So the important thing is that we have to make the changes in fiscal year 25. We don't have any time to wait to continue to make these changes. Oh yeah. There we go. 25 is what this was supposed to say. So again, just again showing you the numbers, kind of showing you where we are falling for this fiscal year, that 26 is the year that becomes a problem. So what's next? More budget cuts are required for fiscal year 25. We have to address the compounding issue, and we cannot wait until fiscal year 26 to make changes. It needs to be adopted district-wide, the long-term planning mindset, because Dr. Johnson cannot do it on her own. I can't do it on my own. It has to be everyone buying into that concept. If not, it will not work. The only way, because I'm an analogy person, the way I can think of it is, you've outgrown your current car. You need a van. You can't afford that van. So you have a couple of choices. You can buy a used van that's going to cost you a lot of money. You're going to have to keep fixing it. Or you can save your money. Save. Cut expenses so that you can afford that new van that's now, maybe it's energy efficient. Maybe now it's better on gas. You can put a bigger deposit down so you're saving on interest. So you have to weigh the two. Are we going to cut expenses now, thinking about long term where we want to be? Or the other option is we can't cut the expenses and we don't have a choice but to try to get more funding. So that's kind of where we are. We need a minimum of 4.7 more in cuts for fiscal year 25. And when I say a minimum, that does not fix fiscal year 27. That just gets us out of the negative for fiscal year 26. I also think that it's important here, even though we might not be able to make a cash reserve policy that we would be more comfortable with, but I think it's important that we also talk about, as a board and as a leadership team, of establishing a cash reserve policy for at least the minimum, which is suggested of 2 months, so that going forward we always build in a buffer into our budget that requires us to have this, and then that keeps us from being able to touch this pot of money for anything, and it's there for times of emergencies like this. This flag, and it's a lot of things that compounded to how we got here, but I think regardless, identifying it now and acting as a board and as a leadership team, well, we've been acting, but to continue to act. I don't think I talked about it, but I've talked about it multiple times. The 5-year forecast is taking a snapshot of what we know today, and we're planning for the future. What we knew today could change tomorrow. So we have to, that's why I think the cash reserve policy is something that we need to think about going forward, because you need to have that on hand for when times like this come, when you need to have cash to continue to fund the district, when you can't get additional revenue into the district. What else? So in regards to the current forecast, because this is the May forecast, unlike the November forecast, where the state issues, like we had to do the written warning, which I think I told you guys I knew that was coming when we did the November forecast. The May forecast, they don't. But we can't go back in November with these numbers, because then fiscal year 26 no longer is a caution, it's a watch, because now we're in the 2-year period. But then we also know that if we don't work on fiscal year 27 as well, then we still go back for a new written plan for a caution. So the ultimate goal is to meet with the leadership team and figure out how we can remove our deficit to get us through fiscal year 26 or 27 to fiscal year 28 when we expect to have new schools. So that's the 5-year forecast. Those are based on the actuals and the projections. Do you have any additional questions based on the data that was submitted?
So, I didn't see, but just the last few slides. But my question as it pertains to, you mentioned the special ed dollars. With us now receiving that 85,000+ for holding our students now at Mount Zion, those figures weren't included because that has not started yet, correct?
Say the $85,000 question
Well, I know
again.
that's just the cost for those students to be educated outside the district, but now.
Oh, but now that we're
back
using them,
home.
yes, yes,
So that's the $85,000+
right.
that had been spent, at least within this school year.
Yep.
So those figures have not been added in
No.
as far as the enrollment for that for next year,
No,
correct?
because it's hard and we're working on that, and this was a part of the plan to try to cut back the contracted services in special ed, was trying to bring some of it back in-house because those expenses are so high. And also when I talk about we grew 51 students, a large part of those 51 students are special ed high category students, so that's what's driving our cost right now. Like, it's not just easy 51 that we get funding for. A lot of it, we have to cover the difference for these children that we're picking up in the district.
So we could see an increase come November, possibly,
It depends on the enrollment,
based on enrollment.
and then it's hard to tell what category the kids are in. And so that's what drives the cost. There are things that we get some reimbursement for, but again, that it's big picture, it goes into a pot, it's split between the state, and depending on how much the pot is, each district gets a little bit of it, but we do get to submit to try to get some costs back on our special ed students. But I know that Miriam is working, trying to figure out how can we cut the cost that we're spending by sending the kids out and bringing them back in-house and educating them ourselves.
Yeah, one of the things, that we've asked Marion to do was to just kind of create that chart. Like, she has a spreadsheet of, the students and the cost of every single student currently. And that has to include, she'll be working, with Ms. Tabor to shore up that, because remember, there's also a transportation cost that goes along with that. And so she will continue to work on that, so that you will be able to see that comparison of our students being served in our district as opposed to sending out. In addition to that, not only, I think, Tabor, you're talking about just students being serviced outside, but we have had a very difficult time finding paras, nurses, intervention specialists, OTs, PTs, and so all of those are hired through contracted services. So say a teacher, which we always want our union employees, if we're not able to fill that, we have to use a contracted service. So say our teacher salary might be 54. They might be giving their employee that 54, but they might be charging us, say, $75,000 to $80,000 for that one employee, and they're pocketing that cost. So it's those things that we're kind of looking at, and she's been like, trying to hire like crazy, to bring that cost. So I've also asked her to kind of match that up as well in that spreadsheet of what it paid to like a Maxim and some of these other companies, and then what the cost is to just serve our individuals here.
Right. And to just like continue to grow on that, you have to remember, like, this is a supply and demand market right now, and it's a demand for those jobs. So we're at the mercy of what they're charging us for them, and that's just to get someone in the door. And then with them, it's their market, so we get them, we're losing them, so we're trying to figure out how can we retain them, and a lot of times that means we have to offer them more money, but we can't afford that. So that's why we're trying to figure out how can we get these staff people in-house to try to save us some money in that way. And I'll be very honest, this is not an easy task. That's not an easy number to try to meet. It's gonna take a lot of work. It's gonna take Dr. Johnson making the board and the leadership team making some tough decisions. But keeping in mind what our ultimate goal is. But it's not gonna be easy. $7.4 million is not an easy number, or $4.7 million is not an easy number to try to come up with. And we just did it in February, and we have to turn around and do it again.
And I think one of the things that, you know, Tabby and I talked about today, that I don't think is by chance that this is difficult.
No.
We just said math doesn't math up. So, like, it's not by chance that as the property values go up, that we're gonna get less money. It's not by chance that as we continue to perform better, that we're gonna get less federal funds. So as a public school, institution, I just don't think it's by chance that this is a very difficult task for us to try to do this.
If you go to the county site, and it's on my webpage, they say that the way schools are set up, it's meant for us to have to keep going back to our taxpayers for more money. But we also know that property taxes are gonna go up this year.
Right.
So we're keeping that mindful that we don't wanna have to go back to the taxpayers when we know that they're already seeing increases. They've already approved for us to get new schools. That's our ultimate goal. We need to make it to that cost savings by reduction in spending. And it just has to be everyone buying into the mentality and understanding the importance and the severity of the budget cuts that we need to make.
And I'm gonna say this, it's not just our district that's going through this.
Absolutely
If you look
not.
at the news, Akron literally just had to cut so many people. So I want our community to know, like, we're doing our best. It's not just Bedford, it's all across the state. So I will say,
It's coming to State House.
huh?
It's coming out to State House.
It is. It is. It's coming out the State House. There's a lot of changes that are coming, and unfortunately, it's not always on our side. But I will say, appreciate the work that you do to keep us updated, because it's a lot. It's a lot of information, and it's not easy to make the decisions that are having to be made. But the communication that's happening is very important. So.
It's definitely happening everywhere, because I was watching online of even Nordonia School Board, and they're talking about doing an operating levy this November, so, Nordonia. So and that's a district that's pretty close to us, so it's happening everywhere. Yeah. But I had a question for Dr. Johnson, though. Have we looked into maybe partnering with colleges, universities, and try to get folks that are recent graduates? Maybe we can help with the salary levels of paying maybe a lower salary if we get, more college graduates versus more seasoned people.
We are in constant contact with our local colleges and universities. One of the hard parts I will say, for example, when it comes to the OTs, PTs, and nurses, we are not just competing with other schools, we're competing with hospitals. So they are a lot of times getting students very early on in their programs, offering sign-on bonuses, things of that nature. The other part is kind of going back to what Mrs. Turner-Birch talked about, is that the state has increased the expectations so much for individuals majoring in special education or any of those specialist fields. The paperwork is ridiculous. So a lot of them would rather choose to honestly make less or go into the private sector or work for a company than to have to take all that paperwork on. But one of the things that we did yesterday in our ELT is we actually did go through most colleges and universities do something called Handshake. And so we actually are on there. It's a very easy way to be in tune with some of our younger candidates. Also, if people graduated from universities, they also can always go back to that. And we post a job and it goes out to hundreds of universities throughout the United States. So we're not just looking locally, we're looking everywhere to make sure that we make those connections. And then we're calling. I think a lot of people underestimate the value of having a conversation and personally reaching out to people. But I would say the best recruiter will be us. So we are finding a lot of candidates just by they are Bedford grads, or, Bedford grads know someone that wants to move closer to home, or they're changing a career, or something along those lines, for sure. But we're also always open. We're also, to new ideas. We had to expand, especially for positions like our CTE, to not just look at frontline, but we have to go on ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, some other things for the private sector type jobs as well.
Okay, I was gonna suggest LinkedIn too, just to try to get the word out.
Mrs. Armstrong, I had a question, and I know this is happening too in a neighboring district. So there's a very large influx of students that are coming to our districts with special needs, and it's very costly to educate because we educate all of our children. I think we do a very good job of that. Is this something that the Board of Education or the community can do as far as to go lobby for additional funds and even to say this to people at the State House? Who are these people? I think we need to know as a community, these folks that we need to talk to, because it's crazy all over, and it is so much, and we need to be, I think, as a Board of Education, just have these people named, we're calling them, we're telling them, they introducing something every day that's cutting costs to public schools like the Bedford City School District, and our community need to know that as well. And I think as a whole, because we know that the numbers are huge coming in, and we do have to have the staffing that requires more staffing for our children with special needs. And there's just a large number of children coming everywhere, and everyone is saying, why? And I think it's because we have our counterparts, the charter schools. They're not going there. They're coming to our public school, but the funds are not matching the students the clientele that we're getting in. So, everybody needs to reach out to these.
Yes, there's definitely several opportunities, and I know Ms. Birch definitely advocates, but from the financial standpoint, I can start sharing with the board when there's opportunities for us to go down. We go down in groups
That's great.
from the treasurer's and business office and go and do hearings. I think it's also important, they stress about inviting your politicians into the district to see the work that we're doing. So those are some of the suggestions. I can send that information to you guys. I would love to do it, but we have so much in-house work to do that I don't have the time to do that, but definitely can share with the board the opportunities that are out there. They're always looking for more people to go, because the power is in numbers sometimes.
And I think that would be great, and our families as well. I think we really need to hard press our families. These great services that we are offering are very, very big expense to the district, and who's funding it? We are. I mean, the community, really the homeowners. And so we need to go back to the state, but we need to go in numbers. And I just think everybody needs to do that. It's nothing we can do alone. We need to have more people go. So I do want to know that.
Okay.
I think it will also be helpful in our partnerships with our municipalities. In the connections that our council and mayors have with our legislators. I like the idea of getting the list of our representatives based on where we live, because it just depends on the side of town that you're on and who you should be writing to, because then some things shift.
So you can do written testimony as well as show up in person at the hearing committees. The entire district, as far as the House, is 19, District 19 with Phil Robinson. You can contact his office, go to ohiohouse.gov, and you can put in his name in the search and it'll pop up his contact information. You can email him.
Let's invite him.
You can check. I have actually been in contact with his legislative aide. He's trying to get here. They're in session on Thursdays. But the House is going on a recess for the summertime. So I'm trying to see if he can come through, because he has he has a couple bills that he's introducing. So I would like for him to come and speak on those new education bills that he's on. Then you also got to pay attention to the House, to the Senate, because there's two chambers and a lot of stuff is coming out of the Senate that is really detrimental to education at this point. And so, as far as our Senate rep is District 18 is what we all live in, and that is Jerry Serino. So please go look him up.
That's why we need that list of
Please,
people for everybody to get.
write to him, because he is advocating right now for Senate 80, I think it's Senate Bill 82, 85. So reach out. My last newsletter did have their contact information on it. But those are districts. Now with gerrymandering, and trying to shift the districts, we may be looking at getting Darnell Brewer, and he will serve Bedford and Walton Hills, and we'll still have Phil Robinson. I can't remember the district numbers, but Phil Robinson's district would change, but he would be Bedford Heights and Oakwood. So that's the thing that, in which before with Juanita Brent, there was a switch because Juanita was over, Representative Juanita Brent was over Bedford and Bedford Heights, and Phil Robinson had Oakwood and Walton Hills. So it all depends on, please somebody sign a petition about gerrymandering. It's a nonpartisan thing, but with the fluctuations, if we don't kind of stop the gerrymandering, please sign a petition because this will kind of help so we won't have so much fluctuation between House districts and Senate districts. So it's important. Go on HowHouse.gov and really take a look at you can type in education and all the education bills that are in each chamber. It'll kind of tell you where they are in committee, whether they're just taking hearings right now or if they're actually going to vote. And some things really just came out. So I will be sharing those at our next meeting as far as what the new stuff that has been approved as far as education is concerned.
So I guess the last thing I'll say is that on Thursday, I am meeting with the executive leadership team. A lot of them got to see the numbers when we started fiscal year 25 budgeting, and I kind of put a pause on that because I knew we needed to really look at where we were. So we're going to reconvene. They all had a little bit of time to look at what reality was, and then we're meeting this Thursday, and then I'm hoping to at least come back to the board to be able to present some of the changes that we're looking to make to be able to right-size our budget.
Thank you.
All right.
I have one more question.
Oh, go ahead.
Since I'm strong. I know that we have everything on the website. I know that we have these meetings and we say these things 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
Are you willing to go to community meetings and discuss some of the finances? You know, we're supposed to be the richest district, we know better. And I think people really do not understand what's really happening.
Yeah.
And we don't have a lot of people that's listening. We definitely do not have a lot of people that come out to our board meetings. And I don't think that it's not our path to know everything that you are presenting tonight.
Right.
And so of course, we're not gonna be able to relay this information that you're sharing with us tonight as eloquent as you just did. So I just wanted to know if we did schedule something with any of the municipalities, or whether it's at their council meetings, or it's at their community engagement, would you be willing to come out and do an abbreviated?
Yeah, I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to that at all. Yeah, if we can check the calendar
I
and
think
find
that's
some
very
dates.
important, especially
Yeah,
if we're
absolutely.
thinking about operating like this, because it's some people, you know, we've seen it in print already, and a lot of misinformation, and I just, it concerned me because people love misinformation. It appears they bite real quickly, and things go out, and we need to have some actual stuff, be very transparent like we are tonight,
Okay.
and people need to hear us.
Yeah, I'm not opposed, and I will. I purposely tried to send this one out a little bit sooner so that it could be on everyone's schedule and not just the standard. I think we do the Monday before. I think we send it out a little bit earlier. And I did update it from the one meeting to make sure that every single community was receiving it. After this, I will send out the PowerPoint to all the cities, but I am not opposed to going out and speaking on this information.
I think the one thing that people do not understand or choose not to, even though they see those numbers, because I see those numbers, I still have questions, and getting those questions answered, is that when the property taxes go up, we don't get the money.
No. Only on
And
new.
that needs to be said so many times. that's what makes us the rich district. Oh, the taxes went up, we gotta pay this. I'm one of those people too, you know, that hit with the, of course, high property taxes. So I think that needs to be said more and to more people, so they can hear it, so they can know, no, we're not a rich district.
Yeah,
We're
I
rich in that
agree.
beautiful service that we provide, but as far as the finances, no, we're hurting just like every other district.
I agree, absolutely.
So thank
And
you
like
so
I said, I
much.
try to put that in every presentation. I know it's repetitive, but I think it's important when you're hearing the information that you remember what drives our revenue and what drives our expenses.
I actually went to, when we went down to the board leadership academy, there was a fantastic, part of that conference was about the finances of school. And it was just so easy for me to absorb the way it was presented, and I actually shared a little bit with you. And I think it's something that we could do for the community, because I don't understand, I'm the first one to say, but I understood how it was presented that night to us and everything involved. And I was so glad you mentioned tonight, because they said when you're a treasurer, and they're talking to all board members, do a presentation on the 5-year forecast. Please believe that they cannot predict what's gonna happen in 5 years. They're talking about just what's in front of them that could change in a year, and everybody goes crazy. Well, that's all they can do. They're not, you know, they just don't know, because you never know what tomorrow is going to bring. So even that, and talking about the different areas that the finance is coded with. This is why we moved from this bucket to this bucket. They actually used buckets, which was very good. It was really for dummies like me. But it was so good. And so I got a better understanding of the money, where the money comes from, how you don't get this and you don't get that, and why some district looks better than the other. Really, really good. So I want to share that with you and with Dante.
All right.
Dante, excuse me, get your last name, but
Oh, yeah.
we get together. We get, always call you Dante, and I don't. There's no disrespect to that.
Mr.
But
Cole.
I just want to make sure that we, Mr. C, I want to make sure that we see that, and so when you're talking about those numbers, make sure the print's bigger, because mine is big. So we can get that information out. We just want to be transparent. Nobody's hiding anything. And so I was just a little bothered by, I saw something in print about the Bedford City School District and about the Board of Education and our administrative staff. And I just want to make sure that's clear, that it's a lot of misinformation. And even though we may not speak about it, because I hate that back and forth stuff, but if we come and share the facts with people, they can make that judgment themselves.
And
So
as
thank you
always,
so
I
much.
encourage you to send me your questions, and I try to make sure that I present on them in the next meeting, so that way there's no, misunderstanding.
And to be clear, that this has not something that happened overnight.
No, it's
This
been,
has
if you look at the
been
forecast, it's
a
been.
Push for quite some time.
Mhm.
So this isn't something that just happened in the last 3 years or the last 4 years.
No.
That it was not necessarily left in a state of actual security even prior.
Thank you, Ms. Turnberg. That was very,
I wanted to make sure in all clearness and clarity that this has not just been in the last 3 to 4 years.
Yep.
And it's just you all have been pretty good with trying to stabilize and keep things stable as to why it's been pushed out. So now it's at the end where it's like, okay, there's still some more stuff that has to be evaluated, so.
All right.
thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think it's just closed the meeting. I don't know where it is. There we go.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item number 5.01, and I need a motion to go into executive session, please.
Oh, yeah.
We gotta vote on.
Oh, I would vote on it. I am so sorry that yes, you might be talking to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. C.
All right, can I have a motion to approve the 5-year forecast after all of this? Yes, I'm sorry.
Motion to approve 5-year forecast as presented?
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Carter, second by Mr. Aiken. I'm sure we have no more questions. All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. Carter,
Yes.
Mr. Akins,
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton.
Yes,
Mrs. Turner Birch.
motion passes 4-0. The discussion was so long, I forgot, thank you. And now on 5.01, could I have a motion to go into executive session, please?
Motion to enter into executive session to consider the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest, and to prepare for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
Oh, second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Carter and second by Mrs. Turner Birch. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner Birch?
Yes.
Mrs. Boynton?
Yes.
Mr. Akins?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0, and we will be going to executive session. We will be going immediately into executive session. We will not be voting on anything as we come out. Thank you. Thank you, board.
All right.